Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 13. I think it's episode. I should be checking these things before I start the intros. I figured. I think it's episode 13. Should we check together? Let's do that. It's episode 13 of Footy and stuff. Geez, what a start. Let's just roll with it. What's the point? 2 days until the 2024 AFL draft. Maybe one day, actually. I don't know when I'm actually going to put this out. You might be watching it 2 days before. You might be watching it one day before. It could be the day of the draft for you. You could be 1 week removed from the draft. I guess that's the good thing about the content being somewhat timeless, I think. But anyway, episode 13, footy and stuff. Today we're redrafting the 2020 AFL draft. It'll be our last one for this year ahead of draft night this week. We did 2010 and 2015 previously, so please check those out if you haven't already, because those are good episodes. But before we do all that, let's quickly get into some news to start us off, I think, because there's a little bit to get through. So, where do we start? Let's start with the Suns rebrand, because that's probably, despite the fixture announcement and all those little things like that, this has been pretty much the talk of the week aside from that. So, the Gold Coast Suns unveiled a new logo, a new jumper, home jumper, a new away jumper, and there's a little bit of discourse, and I wanted to give my opinion on it. So, let's start with the logo. The logo is interesting. The logo I think I've warmed to over the last week since it got leaked. What I've previously said and what I still kind of feel is that it's not really an amazing football logo. Like, it's a good logo, but it doesn't feel like your typical footy logo, if that makes sense. But I think it's okay. It could be worse. It definitely looks a lot better with the Suns text underneath. When it first got leaked, I think all we saw was that logo, that football shaped logo. But no, I think it's okay. It could be worse, honestly. The jumpers, on the other hand, there's a little bit to unpack with those. Let's start with the home jumper, and I don't understand it. I don't get why they've gotten rid of the yellow aspect of it. It's one of those cases, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why are you like those colors work? They're the Gold Coast Suns colors, and they've kind of, I don't know. I don't know why they ditched it, to be honest, because I don't really love the red on red. When you're watching on the TV, it's just going to look like a plain red jumper, and it looks a bit weird. The away jumper, though, I like a lot. Love the blue on yellow. Something different. The colors are a little bit different to what they've gone for in the past. Yeah, I like it a lot, to be honest. Not much more to say on all of that, but there's a St Kilda rebrand to come, though. So there'll be more talk of rebrands in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, whenever that comes. I think it's early December, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that will come. So yeah. Last Thursday, the full fixture was announced. This is the more important news of the week. We're not going to go through the whole fixture yet. Perhaps we could do a full fixture analysis next week. If I decide to do that, you will see it next week, probably. If not, it is what it is. But it will be quite a big episode, so potentially. We'll see how we go with that. However, the big talking points are opening round is back. That schedule was revealed. Gather round is back in Adelaide. That fixture was revealed as well. And there's some stuff about the Kangaroos that we'll talk about at the end. Let's start with opening round. So, the 4 games are Brisbane and Geelong at the Gabba on Thursday night, Sydney and Hawthorn at the SCG on Friday night, Gold Coast Essendon on the Gold Coast on Saturday night, and then Sunday afternoon is GWS and Collingwood at NG Stadium. I think these games definitely lean towards the home teams for sure. Like, just looking at it, my gut would say to pick the 4 home teams. But yeah, look, I think as a Carlton fan, now that we've been involved in one, we're now not going to be involved in another one. I think I might prefer it this way, where we're not involved. And we're playing our first game against Richmond in round 1 instead. But we'll see how it goes. It'll be a fun weekend of footy to watch. I obviously won't be going to any of the games, but yeah, no, interesting. And then the other thing that got confirmed before the fixture came out was the gather round fixture. So we've got Adelaide and Geelong at Adelaide Oval, Collingwood and Sydney at Adelaide Oval. 2 games at Barossa Park are North and Gold Coast, and then Richmond and Freo on the Sunday. Carlton, West Coast at Adelaide Oval. Bulldogs, Brisbane at Norwood, which we'll talk about in a minute. I don't like that at all. Melbourne and Essendon at Adelaide Oval. St Kilda and the GWS Giants at Norwood. And Port Adelaide and Hawthorn to close out the round at Adelaide Oval. Couple of things that I'd change. I like the first two games, Adelaide, Geelong, Collingwood, Sydney. Not too much opinion on those. Barossa Park is nice. That'll be a nice change if that works for them. I like getting people up there. Carlton, West Coast, Richmond, Freo is interesting. So I've heard people talk about those two games and wonder why there's not a swap there. And what I mean by that is, so Carlton, West Coast at Adelaide Oval, Richmond, Freo at Barossa Park. Carlton obviously played Freo in that nail-biting game last year at Adelaide Oval, which went really well. People are saying, why do you not have Richmond and West Coast playing each other as potentially the two worst teams in the competition next year, and then give Freo another crack at Carlton after what happened last year? That's potential. But I also look at West Coast and think that's a huge fan base, and I understand why they would want to give them the opportunity to play at Adelaide Oval again after playing at Mount Barker last year. So I kind of understand both sides, but I think personally I would have liked to play Freo again as well there, rather than playing West Coast. Although we are definitely looking better for a win against the Eagles than we are against the Dockers, that's for sure. The only thing I really don't agree with on this fixture is the Bulldogs and the Lions playing at Norwood. This is potentially two top four teams next year. The Lions will definitely be good. They're the reigning premiers. I don't know if we forgot about that. And they're two pretty decent fan bases as well. I don't know if they're assuming that because of how far it is away that Brisbane fans from Brisbane won't get down there, but I just think you reward the best teams in the comp. I don't understand why potentially your best team isn't playing at Adelaide Oval on your biggest home and away weekend of the year. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how they'd rejig the fixture if they wanted to do that. Do they keep the same game? Do they swap Brisbane with a Melbourne, perhaps? I don't know, but yeah, I don't think they should be playing at Norwood, if I'm honest. And then the other really big news coming out of this fixture is that North Melbourne have sold two home games to Perth, which is interesting. I don't know. I haven't really looked into what the consensus is among North fans with this decision. But from next year, 2.5 million a year to play two games in WA across a 7-day stretch. So two rounds in a row, they'll be playing the Dockers at Optus Stadium and then the Eagles in Bunbury. There's every chance they would have had to play both teams in Perth anyway. So for them to get some money out of it is nice. However, they're still playing those Tassie games next year, so they'll only have, quick maths, 7 games at Marvel Stadium playing at home next year. After 2025, so in 2026, those two home games will return to Melbourne from Tassie and they'll play 9 in Melbourne, 2 in WA. I don't, as I said, I don't know how North fans feel about this. From the outside looking in, I think it's a good deal financially. Football-wise, I think North fans would love to have all 11 home games in Melbourne, but I don't know. I really don't know. We'll see how it works this year. As a neutral, I think that's the easiest way to do it, just to see how it pans out. But yeah, interesting. The only other news that came out of last week that we missed because it happened on the day that I released the last pod, but it's a little bit far removed now. We're about a week and a half out from that. Is that Jack Carroll has gone to St Kilda as a free agent, and a listed free agent. So congratulations to him. Good luck to him. I think he's a very good player. He just didn't have that guarantee that he was going to get any permanent spot or any opportunity in the current team that we have. So I'm glad he's gotten out, and hopefully he can do okay at the Saints. Okay, let's do this redraft. The 2020 AFL redraft. This was the pandemic-affected year, of course, but I still think there's some very good players in here. If you haven't watched, as I said, the 2015 AFL redraft and the 2010 AFL redraft, which are the last two podcasts we've done, go and check those out. It's very similar. But as I did in those episodes, top 25, ranked from 25 to 1. We're going to quickly go through some players that I listed down initially that missed. Nothing outstanding here. It's just players who I thought was somewhat notable that didn't end up making the list. So we've got Samson Ryan from the Tigers, Finn McRae, Caleb Poulter, Corey Durden, who I would have loved to fit in because I think he's going to be good, but just missed out. Morris Rioli Jr., Tyler Brockman, Lockie McNeil, Reef McInnes, Nathan O'Driscoll, Jack Carroll, and Braden Cook. All right, then, let's do this. We'll start with pick 25 as always. Brandon Walker from the Freo Dockers. I like a lot of what I'm seeing from Brandon Walker and what he's been doing. Certainly hasn't set the world on fire by any means. Even his absolute peak is nothing spectacular. But I think he's done just enough and been somewhat consistent enough for the Dockers to be in this list. And he's also put more of a case forward, at least in my opinion, than any of those players I previously mentioned. The Dockers are obviously climbing. If he develops well with the team, I think he could be a pretty fantastic defender. But up until this point, he's been decent at the very least. Originally taken by the Dockers at pick 50 as an academy player, so he's the first academy pick out of a few in this list. We'll go back to the Dockers, so nothing much to say there. Pick 24, Luke Pedlar from the Adelaide Crows. I thought Luke's 2023 season was very good. Kicked 25 goals in 21 games for the Crows in that year. Pretty good team year as well. They almost made finals, of course. It was hard to place him here because of how this season panned out for him. Only managed the 4 games. His shoulder issues absolutely ruined his year. Probably the first victim on this list of the old recency bias tax, if you want to call it that. But I do like him, so he deserves a spot in this 25 at the very least. Originally taken at pick 11 in the 2020 draft, he goes 13 picks lower. Not an academy pick or anything, but ironically, he does get back to the Crows in this one. So no actual redrafting analysis as of yet in this one, but we'll get to some swaps shortly. Pick 23, Ollie Lord. Ollie Lord has lots of potential to be something special for the Power. I think he can be a very good player, at the very least. He was injured for probably a third of this season, came back and only managed 6 games for the Power. I think they have a lot of key forwards to choose from, and that could obviously be to his detriment, given he's not really ahead of any of them currently. Of course, Charlie Dixon's gone, but they have Mitch Georgiadis, Todd Marshall, Jeremy Finlayson, Jack Lukosius, even though it's not guaranteed he's going to be playing there anyway. Asava Radaglia if they choose to persist with him at that end of the ground as well. So he has players to compete with for minutes. So first he needs to worry about actually cracking into that side, but I've seen enough previously to suggest that his best is quite good and he has what it takes. Was drafted at pick 49 in the 2020 draft. Redrafted to Melbourne here. They're crying out for some extra key forward support. So I think he'd be a fit. You could pair Lord with a Jacob Van Rooyen. Having Bailey Fritsch as that third, that key forward piece is probably the big piece that Melbourne should have been targeting, and just they've struggled to acquire that player for whatever reason. I know they have Matthew Jefferson waiting in the wings, but we quite literally haven't seen that guy play a minute of senior footy, so it's hard to suggest that he's the guy right now, but he might get a look in 2025. But yeah, nonetheless, I think Lord could certainly be a nice fit there, given their lack of players in that position. Pick 22, Shannon Neal. I really liked what Shannon Neal dished up this year in the absence of Tom Hawkins. The sample size prior to 2024 was just so small. Like he was extremely green, played 5 games in his first 3 seasons. Managed 15 games this year, though, and booted 23 goals, so not bad at all. He's really looking to creep in there and lock down that permanent full forward role now. Probably shaping to be a 35-plus goal a year key forward supporting Jeremy Cameron, and I think he offers a lot in that role. Obviously, that small sample size that we just mentioned affects his ranking a little bit here, and admittedly, in hindsight, because I'm not changing the ranking now, I've been slightly picky and choosy with where I factor in potential and whatnot. But yeah, Shannon Neal's pretty solid, so I think he definitely deserves a spot here for sure. Originally taken a pick 33 by Geelong, he also gets redrafted to Melbourne here. They had 2 back-to-back picks. Exactly the same as what I just said with Lord, but I'd almost say Shannon Neal would be an even better fit because of the sheer size of him. Obviously, Jacob Van Rooyen's a little bit smaller, a little bit quicker. Ollie Lord isn't that much bigger than Van Rooyen, but Shannon Neal is just that big, athletic ruck / key forward, and I think that mix suits a lot better alongside Jacob Van Rooyen and Bailey Fritsch, who are a little bit quicker. Pick 21, Nick Cox at the Bombers. I'm not entirely sure what the consensus is with Nick Cox amongst the Bombers fans, because obviously his ceiling is very high, but the way I see it, throwing him around in different positions hasn't done him any favours at all early in his career. He's obviously quite versatile. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think to truly thrive and develop, he needs more consistency in that one position that suits him best. I've seen this guy play as a key defender, a key forward, a wingman, pinch hitting in the ruck. And I know that at times he's done quite well in all those areas. But imagine how good he could be if he could knuckle down in one position and just refine his skills in that one spot where you know he's going to end his career. That's just my opinion. Maybe it's not that deep at all. And they're better off utilizing his versatility in all four positions, whatever. But from the outside looking in, that's just the impression I get. Despite all that, he's obviously a very talented player, and we've seen enough thus far to warrant a place here and the place that he's in. I'd just love to see him be able to take that next step sooner rather than later, in my opinion. Originally picked 8 at the Bombers. He tumbles a little bit, but he also goes to Geelong here. As I've said, he's extremely versatile. The Cats could use him anywhere they really need to. There just needs to be a bit of consistency for his sake, I think. Pick 20, Lockie Jones. Bit of an interesting one. I like Lockie Jones. I think he has a future the way he's headed in that power backline. He has a lot of important qualities for his position. Good size, strong, decent in the air, plays with a level of intensity. To this point, though, he's just kind of been fine. Like, he's played a lot of games to this point, 56 to be exact. But he's just never really stood out. And that's fine in a sense. You can be a very successful footballer and never stand out. But I think he'll be most effective if he can just raise that bar a tad. I'm excited to see what he can do this season for sure, especially if he has another mostly uninterrupted season like he did in 2024. Because if he can increase that output, it's going to be really important for them. Was taken at pick 16 by Port Adelaide as an academy pick. Another player who drops slightly, but he obviously goes back to the power as an academy player. Pick 19, Eddie Ford. I really like Eddie Ford. I really do. It may surprise some people that he's above some of the guys that I've just mentioned. And I'd get it because he's been kind of unassuming at times. But in an underperforming team that people aren't particularly watching every week, I just think the Roos have gotten really good use out of this guy so far. And I think he's going to continue to be pretty good for them as they rise up the ladder. 31 goals in 40 career games for the Roos. 15 of those came in 18 games for the club in 2024. If he's a permanent fixture in this Roos team as we go forward, and they start to climb up the ranks, and he develops at the rate that I think he is, then they've got a good one for sure. I'm not quite certain what his ceiling is, but I think that'll become clearer in the next year or two as he has better service. Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does. Originally taken a pick 56 by the Roos, he goes to Collingwood in this one. They have a pretty solid group of forwards there. They got Bobby Hill, Jamie Elliott, Lockie Schultz, Bo McCreary. So I don't know off the top of my head if he'd be a lock in their best 22, but I think any club could make pretty good use of him, to be honest. He'd be good depth to have there at the very least. Pick 18, there's another North player. It's Will Phillips. For someone taking at pick 3, he obviously hasn't hit anywhere near those heights and hasn't consistently shown anything to suggest that picking him at that time was the right move for North Melbourne to make. However, there's still so much time for him to make everyone look silly, and I think he's going to give that a red-hot crack, because the glimpses that we've seen from him, honestly, they've impressed me. He's shaping to be a pretty fantastic tagging option. We know that. I was there this year when he did a job on Nick Dacos, got subbed out, I think, at three-quarter time, and then Dacos just had a run at it. And it practically gave Collingwood the win in the end because it was a very narrow victory. So we know he has the ability to shut down those players. Super impactful playing that role, in my opinion. But he's also shown that he can win his own ball at times. So he's not limited to that tagging role. I'd like to see him build on those other qualities and become a good ball-winning midfielder in his own right. I think he's going to get a lot better with some more consistency. I'd love to see him get that full season under his belt because he's up until this point, he's played 16 games, and then 11 games. So he hasn't really had that full run at it. To be fair, though, North's midfield is actually starting to come together really well. It's shaping really well. And he has names to compete with there. LDU, Wardlaw, Luke Parker's going to come in there. Colby McKercher runs through there. I'm probably missing names there, to be honest. But yeah, as I said, it's shaping well. So hopefully he can kick into gear soon. And I'd be really excited to see that happen for him. Originally taken a pick 3 by North Melbourne, he goes to GWS here. I've spoken about the midfield mix at the Giants previously, about how strong and well-rounded it can be with the guys they have there. I do wonder where Will Phillips would fall in that pecking order. Even like a guy like Toby Bedford is playing that tagger role and locking guys down, so he doesn't necessarily need to play that role. I'm just not sure off the top of my head if there's a lot Phillips would bring that they don't potentially already have, but it's an interesting one. On to pick 17, Sam Berry. Sam Berry has some nice qualities about his game. Perhaps he's not as dynamic as some of the names around him, Dawson, Rankin, Saligo in particular. But what the Crows have in Sam Berry is a fantastic tackler, very strong contested player. And I think the more minutes he gets, the more opportunity he's going to have to clean up that disposal and the creative side of his game where he's perhaps lacking. So I think I'd definitely love to see him get that chance because defensively, I think he's really, really good. Originally taken a pick 28 by the Crows, he goes to the Pies in this one. I think it actually complement their mix nicely as well. You've got your electric attacking players in DeGoey and Dacos. You've got your more technical ball winning midfielder in Tom Mitchell. You've got the veteran Scott Pendlebury. I think his defensive edge is something they could make use of, and he'd certainly learn a lot playing with those players as well. Harry Perryman coming in there too. Jack Crisp as well. There's another two players for you. Anyway, pick 16. Heath Chapman. I'm a big fan of what Heath Chapman does. Dockers fans would definitely be high on him for sure. Injured almost all of last year. He came back this year and he was very solid, in my opinion. He certainly still has a lot to prove, and I think more people will know his name as the Dockers get better and he gets better with them as they start to climb. He's big, but he's pretty quick, reads the play well, fantastic user of the football as well. He's going to be a mainstay in their side for sure. And as I said, if and when they make that big jump, he's going to be a huge part of it. And I'm ready for him to sort of announce himself to the rest of the competition properly because I think he's very good. Originally taken a pick 14 by the Dockers, so a slight drop, but he goes to the Giants here. They have some fantastic tools back there, so you'd obviously have competition for minutes. But I think he offers something a little bit different to what a Connor Iden would, for example, with his speed and his ball movement. So I think he'd complement that system nicely if they were to fit him in. Pick 15, Archie Perkins. Very interesting one here. I think at his best, we've all loved what Archie has provided for the Bombers. But I also think much like what I said previously with Nick Cox, he maybe needs just a little bit of consistency. He's played a good amount of time in the midfield, a good amount of footy as a forward as well, but he hasn't really had a permanent run in either area. I can only assume that end goal is for him to be that midfielder, that proper attacking midfielder, and I think he'll be pretty fantastic at that when he gets that proper run in there, but he just needs that in the next year or two for sure. But nonetheless, his best games for the Bombers have been fantastic to watch, and I have no doubt there's going to be still plenty to come for Archie. Originally taken a pick 9 by the Bombers, he drops to 15, goes to the Dockers. Speaking about his need for midfield minutes, I do wonder how much time he'd actually be afforded playing in there with Sarong, Brayshaw, Young, Bolton now as well. In saying that, though, if they were to make it work and all 5 of those players were to make up that midfield mix, I think it'd be very interesting to watch. They all kind of bring something different in a way, so it would be very interesting. Pick 14, Tanner Bruin. I think he's going to be really good. I think Tanner Bruin's going to be really good. He never got as much of an opportunity at the Giants, obviously, but his first 2 years at the Cats have been pretty solid. I think his best games are a nice indicator when it comes to him. He's not been consistently brilliant just yet, but he's definitely got all the qualities to do so, and that shows in the best games that he's played. He's fairly clean with the footy, solid contested player, very good defensively. I like him, and I think he's nice and well-rounded. Originally taken a pick 12 by the Giants, goes to North, 2 picks lower. They obviously have some very solid midfielders, as we just mentioned. But I think he has the potential to complement their output, and I think he'd be a good addition to round out that group, in my opinion. Speaking of North Melbourne, pick 13, Tom Powell. He took a big step up in 2024. I loved what he provided for the Roos at times this year. He's never going to get as many minutes as some guys at North, the guys that we mentioned before, or as much recognition as all of them. But he's a very good tackler, pretty solid ball winner. We saw him jump up to that 25, 30 disposal mark a few times this year. And he's only going to get better at doing that as well, provided that he keeps getting minutes in those correct positions. I like it. Originally taken a pick 13 by North Melbourne. He goes to pick 13 again, but he goes to GWS because I think there's an extra academy player above that pushes the clubs back. So he goes to the Giants here, much like his teammate Will Phillips did. I don't know what they'd actually do with these guys in real life, but luckily it's completely hypothetical, so it doesn't matter because they've got a very good midfield and they don't need these extras, in my opinion. But yeah, no, good player, Tom Powell. I like him a lot. Pick 12, Braden Campbell at the Swans. Interesting one to rank here. I think on the surface, yes, he's very good, Braden Campbell. But compared to 2023, which was his best season so far, in my opinion, he didn't really get too much of a run at it last year. And that's probably down to the quality that Sydney have in his best positions. And that landed him as a sub more often than not, I think. I don't have the exact numbers. But when he has come on as that sub, I think he's been very good. And the lack of consistency has just affected him in those full games he gets. He'll be better when he gets a chance to play properly week in, week out and show that on a more consistent basis. Because at his best, he's very good. Pretty impactful as well, but he hasn't had the best chance to show that. Originally taken a pick 5 by the Swans as an academy player, so he goes back to the Swans. Not much to say there. Pick 11, Jake Bowie. A premiership player. Came into that D side and played real nice footy and a good role in that 2021 final series as a young kid. Then went on to famously go 17 games unbeaten in that side. So he had a brilliant start to his career. Fairly consistent player when he plays, which I like. Nothing crash hot, but he's been a pretty good player over these last 3 years, in my opinion. He finished last season really well after being injured that first half of the year. If they're as a team looking to bounce straight back up into finals after what was a pretty disappointing year as a whole, I think he's the kind of player who's going to have to play most weeks because you need a player like that who just works hard and gets the job done in defence. Originally taken a pick 21 by the D's, jumps up to pick 11 and goes to the Crows. They're not bursting at the seams with defensive talent, especially in Bowie's spot. So I think that'd actually be a decent fit off a halfback flank for sure. Pick 10, Elijah Hollands. What a boy. Absolutely loved what Elijah dished up for us this season. I think he's got all the makings of a really impactful midfielder slash forward. Never got any sort of run at it for the Suns, obviously. Comes to Carlton, 22 games this year, 17 goals. Had a couple of really, really good performances. King's birthday against the Bombers was probably the highlight, and it shows that the ceiling is pretty high for him down the line. He's not going to live on a half forward flank forever. I think we're expecting that midfield time to maybe go up slightly next year, so it'll be exciting to see where that goes. But for now, I love the role that he's playing for us. Originally taken at pick 7 by the Gold Coast Suns, he goes to the Bombers in this one. I think of all the players and positions they have, I don't necessarily know if Elijah would be a need more than a want for the Bombers. They have Caldwell, Perkins, Hobbs, Gresham. These are all players who are somewhat similar-ish in the sense that they can split their time between midfield and forward, and Elijah is that player. But he is a very good player, and he's gonna be very solid for the Blues. So there's no reason why the Bombers wouldn't take him, if that makes sense. But if you can accommodate for all of them, I think they'd certainly take him for sure. Pick 9, Riley Thilthorpe. He certainly has something about him. We saw it when he came back late this season. He had a bit more muscle. He looked a bit more dominant. I think he's going to be fantastic with a full run at it next year. His numbers aren't totally indicative of the forward that he is as well. 59 goals in 53 games, but he spent a lot of time on the wing as well as in that key forward spot. But I think they can definitely rely on a Thilthorpe Fogarty duo going forward as they move Tex out of that mix. And it's going to work for them, in my opinion. I like him. Looks scary as well with a beard, as opposed to that photo on the right of your screen currently. He's a scary looking man. Um, Originally went to pick 2 with the Crows, so he drops, but he's got plenty of potential. He goes to the Bombers in the redraft as well. They have a lot of key forwards, but I think he'd probably be the best in the side. Him and Caddy would be a nice pairing, in my opinion, much like what I just said with him and Fogarty. Yeah, I think they'd definitely do it. Pick 8, Bo McCreary. The Pies have a pretty fantastic player in Bo McCreary, you have to say. Still very unassuming at times, in my opinion. As Carlton supporters, we tend to force ourselves into a position of disliking Collingwood players and vice versa. That's just the nature of the rivalry. They hate us, we hate them. But Bo is one of those players I really appreciate at Collingwood as a Carlton fan. There's a handful of them, a very small handful, and he's one of those players that I don't really have much bad to say about. His speed, his pressure. I think if he finds more of an eye for goal, that'd be the one criticism of his game as a whole, as a forward. If he finds more of an eye for goal, he's going to really elevate himself. 52 in 77 games isn't a massive number. He's floating around that 13 goal a year mark. But yeah. Originally taken a pick 44 by the Pies, he also goes to Essendon, their 3rd pick in a row, and I think this is a better fit than what the Elijah Hollands mid-forward type is. I think they could really use the pressure that he brings. They're one of those clubs where there aren't really many good players they couldn't make use out of, other than maybe key forwards, because they have quite a few that are useful when they get a run at it. But I think Bo would definitely work there, in my opinion. Pick 7, Jack Ginnivan. The man of the hour, a name that always seems to be on the tip of everyone's tongue. He brings a lot of talk to the table, but one thing he definitely does is back it up. 58 goals in 42 games for the Pies to go with a premiership. Now at the Hawks, fighting for some team success there. Kicked 28 goals last year for them in a forward line that shares the load nicely, so that's a pretty solid total for a small in that team. He's fantastic, so much fun to watch. And he'll only get better playing with that group there as well. Originally taken a pick 13 in the rookie draft by Collingwood, so an absolute steal. He's at the Hawks now, but he goes to Gold Coast in this redraft. We spoke last week about how, with Tom Papley, who went there in the last redraft, how the Suns have never really had that proper small forward, that little annoying guy. Every team needs one. And I think Guinea would definitely offer that to them for sure. So yeah, I think perfect fit, definitely. Pick six, Logan McDonald at the Swans. Logan still has the potential to land in the top three of this redraft, for sure, by the end of his career. He's shown so many qualities that would suggest that he's going to be a dominant key forward in this league. But I think his output compared to the five names I put above him has fallen away slightly at times, and the consistency as well. There are a variety of factors. But he can kick goals. We know this. This year was really his first proper year with Buddy Franklin gone, that he was the main man in that Sydney forward line. So I think he does have time to settle a little bit more, and I think he will. But I also think Swans fans from now would be fair to have an expectation for him to start hitting that 50 goal mark and matching it with those elite key forwards, because floating around 35 isn't really going to cut it, in my opinion. But he certainly gets away with that at times as well, due to how effective their small forwards and their general forwards usually are. But if he can make that jump, he'll certainly be a case for one of the best players in this draft. Originally taken a pick four by the Swans in this draft, so he drops two picks and he goes to Hawthorn. They have Mitch Lewis, they have Cal Shadir, they have Marby Orchol, but they have also been linked with Jamara Ugle-Hagan this year and an extra key forward. I don't think it'd be out of the question for them, depending on how Deer continues to develop, whether Mitch Lewis can get fit, how Chol continues to contribute to the team. I think he'd have as much chance of developing perfectly and being the main man in that Hawk system as he does currently in the Swan system. So I don't hate the fit at all. Pick five, Ollie Henry at the Cats. It honestly feels like this guy's just been around forever. Like, I think he's a pretty mature player for his age, one of the most mature players in this draft class. 106 goals in 76 games at the Cats and the Pies. I think his last couple of years have been pretty fantastic. He's never going to be the main guy at Geelong. That's just not the type of player he is. So to chalk up to 37 goals this year and 41 last year as support to guys like Jeremy Cameron, Tom Hawkins, now Shannon Neal coming through as well to replace Tom. I think Ollie Henry's super impressive as that third, in my opinion. It was close between him and the two guys below, Logan and Guinea. But I think I appreciate how Henry just flies under the radar a tiny bit more and really gets the job done. So he sneaks into that top five spot for me. Originally picked 17, getting selected. Originally taken a pick 17 by the Pies, he goes to the Swans in this redraft. I think him and Will Hayward are fairly similar players. So I can't say whether they'd need him or not, but he'd definitely add to what is already a pretty good forward line there. Like, I think the two of them playing together with two key forwards and a couple of smalls would be a good mix, in my opinion. Pick four, Josh Tracy at the Dockers. This guy's got it. He's come out of nowhere. Like, to be fair, I've given him this spot purely based on one season, but I think he deserves it off what he did, because he was actually outstanding. Started his career with 29 goals in 36 games. Very unassuming. Didn't know a ton about him until this year, as I said. Wasn't setting the world alight by any means. In fact, it was probably the opposite. And then he comes out this year, bang, 45 goals. And he was good. Good. I don't think this was a fluke at all. I think he's an outstanding key forward. As they get better, he's going to be piling those goals in, I think. He kicked at least one in every game he played this year. Just super, super consistent. Very impressive. I like him a lot. And I think he deserves a top five spot here. And I think he's going to be, when it's all said and done, a top five player in this draft. Originally taken a pick seven in the rookie draft by the Dockers, so an absolute steal, like such a steal. Goes to North Melbourne in this redraft, and as brilliant as Nick Larkey is, I think they'd love a proper, really good young key forward to pair with him. They obviously have brought in Jack Darling to support. They've had Bryn Teakle up there at times, Toby Pink up there at times. They really want that proper second to him, I think, in the long term. Just imagine Larkey and Tracy together over the next 5 years. My God, scary. Pick three, Max Holmes. Cracking player. Cracking player. More than deserving of a top three nod here, in my opinion. He wouldn't be too far off jumping to second, depending on how that player continues to progress. But yeah, very good player. 2024 has easily been his best season so far. I think that goes without saying. Took home the club's best and fairest. Extended squad member in the All-Australian team as well. So he's had this massive improvement, but he's probably been a mainstay for 3 years now already. So he's very impactful, very reliable. And he'll continue to be that for the Cats, in my opinion. Not much more to say there, I think. I think in a list like this one, where the players are so young, you have less to say about the really good ones, because you don't really have as much doubt as to where they're headed. Whereas you can talk about the potential of the players that are a bit lower, a little bit more, if that makes sense. But yeah, really good, Max Holmes. Goes to the Crows in this redraft. at pick 3. He was originally taken at pick 20 by the Cats. I don't think there's a single team that wouldn't accommodate for Max Holmes if they were to have the opportunity to take him. He slots straight into that midfield for sure, the Crows. But there's a lot of places that he could go. He's outstanding. On to the top 2 now. In pick 2, we have Jamara Ugle-Hagan. Has Jamara lived up to his pick 1 status from 2020? No, not yet. Is he clearly a ridiculously talented player with a ridiculously massive upside? Definitely. And you can tell when you watch him. In fairness to him as well, some of the individual performances that he's pulled together to this point have been next level. Absolutely next level. You only have to look back to the Swans' performance this year, where he was just absolutely dominant. And you see what this guy has in the locker. The potential for him to be that number 1 key forward in the competition, it's in there somewhere. And it's going to be in there always until he does it, really. We're always going to talk about it. But when you strip it down and you take away all the expectation and the potential that he hasn't yet fulfilled, I think you still have a pretty fantastic player who's grown nicely and pretty gradually over the 4 years that he's had in the league. Didn't play much in 21, kicked 7 goals, 18 goals in 17 games for 22, 35 goals in 2023, and then he further improved to 43 in 2024. So it seems we're edging closer to that real top level season where he starts to match the output of those very best forwards, 50 plus goals, pushing to 60 goals. I like Jamara a lot. I really can't wait to see him do that because I think he has it in the locker, as we said. Originally taken a pick 1 by the Bulldogs as an academy player, so he goes back to the Bulldogs at pick 2, only 1 spot lower, but he has a lot to prove for sure. And that brings us to pick 1. I'm not doing any spectacular in-depth analysis for this one because it's just Errol Goulden. Like, it's so clear and obvious that I don't think I have to give any level of justification or reasoning for why I have him here, like I've had to do with any other pick or any previous pick 1. This guy's just been sensational. To use last week as an example with Jacob Wiedering, that was an easy choice for me to make because more than anything, it was based on my personal belief, the standard that I hold Jacob to and the level that I truly believe he's at. This one, though, feels as close to objective, even though it's completely subjective. It feels as close to objective as it can possibly get in this scenario because of how just above and beyond anything that the other players have shown he has been. Like, I'm serious. I'm not listing anything off. We don't need accomplishments, no stats, because I don't need to. He's actually just a robot. Originally want to pick 32 in this draft to the Swans as an academy pick. Stays at the Swans in this redraft because of that. Not much more to say. Just clear as day, pick 1. What a player. So that brings us to the end of episode 13, the last redraft before the actual draft for 2024. I will be back soon to review the draft in full. That'll be a nice episode for us to sink our teeth into. But until then, please like, subscribe, comment your suggestions, follow the socials. They're always in the description. And if you're on audio platforms, be sure to give us a rating because those always help. But until then, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and I will see you later.